Begin the current Daf Masechtas Kidushin Daf Chavei. Begin the second line down at the top of the Amud. But the Gemara continues with a story that will relate back to the halacha that we're discussing from the previous Daf. We were discussing that from that previous Mishnah. We're talking about the kinyonim, the third in a series of Mishnayos that talks about kinyonim of individuals. So we were discussing regarding the Evet Kanani, how you acquire Evet Kanani and how he acquires himself back. So the Gemara said, besides what we mentioned in the Mishnah of Kesef and Shtar, there's also the biblical halacha of Shen V'ayin. And we said it's not only Shen V'ayin, it's also any other Aver, Rashi Avarim, that are revealed, that you could see, that those, if he cuts off, if the master injures, that it would send them free also. On that, the Gemara brings in the story relate back to a halacha relating to this discussion. Shares corresponds because of Necheskel turned him to today's daf. So we're discussing today's daf, but the Gemara is going to ask the question of Evet Shesir Rabbi Bebeitzim. If the slave, his master castrates his testicles, what's the halacha? Would that be also sending him free? That relates to halacha of Esmer Abba Rashi Vam Sheba Adam, the 24 tips of the organs by a person. Kulam imitam shemichya, those Rashi Avam which actually send the slave free. If he has a michi, which is a type of a neg of tzeras on that area, it's not going to be tamei, as we'll explain, because you can't see the whole thing at one shot. The Gemara has a machlekes, a discussion regarding lashon. If a person removes his eved's tongue, does the eved become free or not? Is that included things that are revealed or not? The Gemara discussed regarding hazah. Let's say he's spraying the purifying waters on his tongue. Is the hazah valid? Does it have to be on something also that is revealed? Which gets us into a discussion regarding basis asarim. Regarding the halachas of tumah, we generally say that tumah does not is transfer when it's by a concealed area. What is considered basis asarim? Then we go to the next Mishnah, which continues on Kanyanim. Now we went from the woman to the Ebed Ivri to the Ebed Kanani. We seem to be going lower and lower, going to ways that a behema gasa and behema daka are acquired. The way you acquire large livestock and small livestock. And then the Gemara ends off by discussing ways that one acquires an elephant, according to Rabbi Shimon, who the only way you could do it is hagbah, and how exactly are you going to be doing hagbah on an elephant is the Gemara's final discussion. So we begin the current Daf Chavhei. We begin the second line down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara starts with a story. Savei de Nezonya. That's the name of a plakim. The elders of this place called Nezonya. So la'asu lepirka de Rav Chizda. They didn't come to the drasha, to the shiur of Rav Chizda. It's not a leicht zach. You don't come to the Rav shiur. Amalei Rav Nuna. So he said to Rav Nuna, Zil Tzaninu. Rav Chizda, who they didn't come to his shiur, told Rav Nuna, go and tell them to put themselves under house arrest. Which, as Rashi explains, that's really a terminology of nidui for a Talmid Chacham, like excommunication. As the Gemara says, tell them in an honorable way, keep yourself locked up in your house. So that's what he said. Tell these elders, these zikanim, these the mochushiv, then they're not allowed to come to the derusha. Tell them to lock themselves in the house. So Azal Amalahu, he went and he told to them, my time lost upon the pirka. Why didn't the rabbis come to the Rav's drasha to Rav Chizda? So Amalei, they said to him, why should we come to his drasha? What does he know already? To be in Milsa, we asked him something, but and he didn't answer. He doesn't even know anything, and we're not coming to his drasha. Amalahu, so he said to them, Mi pe'isa minoi midi. Did you ask from me anything? And I can't answer it to you? So Boy Minei, they asked from Rav Amnuna the following question. Eved shesir rabbe bebeitzim. And this is where it relates back to the discussion of the previous daf regarding sending the Eved free when you injure one of the Rashi Evarim. So what happens if the slave is emasculated by his master in his testicles? What's the halacha? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. Kemum shebegolei dami? Is this considered a revealed blemish because it's hanging in the scrotum and it's recognizable from the outside? Like we said, it doesn't necessarily mean what you actually see when he's not dressed. When he's not dressed.
So now the Gemara didn't explain what the 24 harm was. They're assuming we know that.
Yeah, the Gemara didn't. Yeah, there's not necessarily even just the 24. There are. We're going to see that actually shortly. There are what's mentioned in a Mishnah elsewhere in Taharas regarding Rashi Evarim in another context. But it's really any Rashi Evarim. It's really any tips of, and it has to be something that's that and mum shabagali. So the question is, would you say that this is considered mumsha begali because it's you could see it's hanging, it's in the scrotum and it's recognizable from the outside. Or maybe no, since it's hidden inside the scrotum, so therefore it's not considered something that's recognizable. So Lahav Biyadish Rav Nuna did not have the answer to the question. So Amalei, they said to Mashmecha, what's your name? Amalei says Hamnuna. Amalei, they said to him, Lav Hamnuna Elikarnuna. What does that mean? What does that play on words? So Rashi says, Karnuna is from Yeshvi Kronis. You're not someone who sits and learns. You're from the guy who's a Leidigeya, sits in the corners. Don't call yourself Hamnuna. Now the Gemara, some Gemaras bring on the side from the Aruch that when they told him Karnuna, Chas V'Shalom, they weren't disgracing him. Rather, they said to him, "You think the fish are warm? The fish are cold. It's fit for you to be called a kalta fish." Because if you look at Taisus, he brings from Ben Chananel that you're saying Hamnuna, the word Ham, the Ches and Hey are interchangeable. Your name Hamnuna, Nuna means fish. So that would mean Hamnuna. The fish is hot. No, it's not like that. Bista kalta fish. That the fish is cold, meaning it's not, you don't have what to say, you're not no flavor over here. So therefore you're not Amnuna, you're Karnuna. So Asla Kamed Rav Chizda. He came in front of Rav Chizda, and Amalei, Rav Chizda said to him, Masnita Baiminach. What do you mean? They asked from you a brisa. From the brisa that's taught on the Mishnah that we're going to quote right now, of Rabbi Omer Afasirus, from there you could answer the question that they asked you. What's the source? Because the learn the Mishnah Masechet in the Goyim. This is what you were just asking before. Esrim va'arba. The number 24 is from this Mishnah in the Goyim. There's 24 Roshei Ivarim Sheba Adam that are the tips of organs of a man. And here it's in a different context of halacha. We were quoting in the halacha context of sending the Eved free. But the source of this in another context is Kulam ein metama mishum michya. They're all not going to have the tumah of a nega of a michya, which michya is one of the types in the Goyim mentioned in the Torah, Meyukir Gimel, michya's basar chai b'seis. It's like when you have raw flesh that's from a burn on this nega. So it says there in the pasuk regarding the michya, l'chol mare ein hakoyin, to the entire vision of the eyes of the kohen, which teaches us that all of it has to be seen to the vision of the kohen as in one shot. That excludes a michya which is in a slope that goes down on all sides, that you cannot see the whole nega with its top and its bottom at one shot. You would have to look at this side, look at that side. That's not considered l'chol mare ein hakoyin. So therefore, these Rashi Evarim would not be able to have the tum of a michya. Beilahena, what are these? So they are Rashi Etzbois, Yidayim, B'Reglayim, the tips of the fingers of the hands and the feet. So all those 20 fingers are not going to be able to have a tum of michya because you can't see it all, because you can't see the other side of the finger. You would have to move it around. Can't see it at one shot. You're looking from the top, you're not going to see the bottom. So therefore, they don't have a tum of michya. And b'rashe aznayim, the tips. Right. It's not just the top. It's around the whole. No, anywhere in the hand. If you have a big fleck on the. If you have a big fleck on the top of the hand, you could see it. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's around. Yeah, in the Chadami. But that would be something that's possible to see. Here, these things are not really possible to see. Right. So you're saying that what that. Right. Yeah. No, the Shaila is saying what happens if it's so big you can't see the whole thing at one time. It would be the same thing. These are. Shaila, that's maybe what you're saying, that you can't even see the shear because you have the michya in the middle and then you have the nega on the side, maybe not seeing even the whole thing surrounded. Right. And maybe that's why around the arm or something that you wouldn't have to see the whole thing. That would be enough to be matamid. And b'rosh is naim, the tips of the ears, also has the same slope. And V'rosh HaChoitim, the tip of the nose. V'rosh HaGviya, the tip of the male organ. V'rosh Dadim Shebeisha, the tips of the breasts of a woman, because in contrast to a man, who they don't protrude so much, so it's not such a slope. But by a woman, you wouldn't be able to see it all at one. Yehuda says no. He says no. Even the nipple by a man would have the same thing. Okay, but the main thing really we want is the next part. The Tanya Allah we learned on this Mishnah Abraisa that Bekulam regarding all these Rashi Ivarim, if the master cut it off, it's a mumsha b'galoi, it's a revealed blemish that doesn't come back. So Eved Yitzbim Lecheirus. So it's really unrelated to the idea what that Mishnah is told. There is told because it's slope cancel the whole thing all the time. Here it's the idea of the Rashi Avarim, which is the concept that it's a critical feature of the person, like his eye and his tooth, and it doesn't grow back. So the Eved would be Yitzbim Lecheirus, the slave would go free with them. Now, the next point is the next main point of the Brisa. Rabbi Yomi, he says, Av hasirus. He says, also, in addition to these that were mentioned in the Mishnah Negoyim, regarding the halacha of the slave, castration would also send them free. Now, Rashi points out, what's with Shen v'ayin? Why didn't Rebbe, once he's adding on in the Brisa to what the Mishnah says, the Mishnah there doesn't talk about the eye and the tooth. Why don't you mention that for an Eved, he also goes free besides those 24. Also, when you knock out his eye and his tooth, that's a Rashi. That you don't have to mention the Brisa. That's explicitly what's called Zil Kar Beiravu. Just send him to Chayda, he'll learn the Pasuk in Chumash. And the Tanakama wouldn't disagree with that. It's just that this case of Tzilus that the Tanakama doesn't agree, Rabbi's saying, even Tzilus. Ben Azayim, he says, Af haloshin. Because if the master cuts off his tongue, sometimes you see it when a person is talking, and therefore that's considered mumsh b'galoi, and hence he would go free for that. But one thing we answered our question. The question was, Rav Chizda says, why didn't Rav Nuna? You could have answered them from this brisa that you see that Rebbe holds that afasirus is also going to be mumsh b'galoi, and the Eved would go free if the master castrated him. Okay, now once we brought this in, because it related back to the halacha of the previous daf, Amamar. So Rav Chizda concludes his statement to answer the question of the elders of this Nezanya. What do you see, says Rav Chizda? Rabbi Omer Afa Sirus. Rabbi said also Sirus. So Sirus the Mai. So which Sirus are we talking about over here that's going to send the slave free? Ilem is Sirus the Gid. If you think, there's a few ways to castrate a person. If you think it means to cut off, to castrate his actual male organ, so Hainu Gviya. So that's the corona. That was already counted already by Negoyim. I mean, all of them. The Tanakh says ever would be Yotz L'Cheirus. So what would Rebbe be adding on more than what the Tanakh said? Elalav Sirus the Beitzim. Obviously, then it must be the Sirus of the Beitzim. So you see that the question of the elders of Nezanya was the Machlekes Rabbanan and Rebbe, because Rebbe held that it would send them free, and the Tanakama, obviously, who is not saying that, would hold that you wouldn't send them free, and that concludes the Rav Chizda's statement. Now the Gemara parenthetically has a question on this. Rebbe Amafa Sirus. Rebbe had said that also Sirus will send the Eved free. Now, so the Gemara asks, Rebbe Loshen Loi? What, according to Rebbe, cutting off the tongue would not be a mumsha b'galoi, because that was only Ben Azah who had on os in the tongue. But according to Rebbe, not. There seems to be a contradiction from another halacha. What's this halacha? The Brisa says that if someone was spraying what's called the paraduma purification waters, and b'nitza hazal pip, so you got to spray it on the person. Obviously, the guy doesn't get covered in the paraduma waters. You just got to spray it at him, so it's got to hit the guy. Let's say it sprays on his mouth of the guy who's tameh. What's halacha? It's actually machlekes. Rabbi Yomi says hiza, that is considered as he was sprayed, because even though as the Gemara is going to shortly tell us. When you spray it, it has to be on the revealed part of the person. The mouth is valid. The sages say, loy hiza, it's not considered a valid spraying.
Is there a shiur to hiza?
What?
Is there a shiur?
You have to spray from Kidei Hazaya, but I think it's whatever it is that gets sprayed on him. Whatever it is, it's not much. So the Gemara says, okay, my lav, when we're having this machlekes on the mouth has a few organs inside of it, there's lips and there's tongue. My lav, al-shayne. Don't we mean that it was on the tongue? And you see that Rebbe holds that it's considered a spray, and therefore you see that it's considered that it is revealed. So how could Rebbe say, in regards to the Eved, that he's not going to go free when you see he considered, yes, an Eber Shebegali? So no, it's al-sfasav. The machlekes was regarding the lips, not regarding the tongue. Gemara says al-sfasav on the lips. Well, pshita, then obviously it should be considered as a valid spray. And actually, that would be difficult on the chachamim. Why wouldn't it be considered a valid spray? Everyone sees the lips. Says Gemara, no, why would you say zimnin dechalim sivsei? Sometimes a person forcibly closes, he purses his lips strongly until they get connected one with the other. And therefore, you would not consider it as revealed, because sometimes they're hidden when he closes it tight, when you're getting very upset and closing those lips, and you don't see any more of those lips. So, Kamash Malon, that's the Chiddush that Rebbe holds. No, if you spray it on the lips, it is going to be considered as revealed. And maybe that's what the Chacham disagree and say that no, it's not going to be considered as revealed. Says the Gemara, but you cannot say that. Because Vatanya learned the Bryce explicitly that says, Al-Lishaynai. It doesn't say the words piv, it says on his tongue. So, clearly, Rebbe holds the tongue is considered as revealed, and that's why the Hazal is good. How does he say by Evid that it's not considered revealed? Tanya, moreover, we learned in the Brisa regarding the blemishes of a firstborn animal. She taught regarding the Bechayres, a firstborn animal is given to a kohen. Has to be given as a carbon. If it has a blemish, then he can't be brought as carbon. He uses it as for his regular stuff. The Brisa says over there, B'shenitel reiv haloshin. If most of the tongue was cut off, that's a blemish of a firstborn animal. And Rebbe, he says, and we dafka want Rebbe, that's what we're discussing, says reiv hamadaber shabelashaynai. Says most of the speaking part of the tongue. Anyone who's had tongue, you have Roshana, maybe tongue, you see how a tongue is, that there's a part where the tongue is actually, a lot of the chunk of it is there in the back, where it's attached to the animal, but then there's an area that separates from where it's connected in the back. That's called the speaking part of the tongue, like as Rashi explains. Even though obviously you don't find usually a talking cow, but it's called the talking part, since by a person, that part of the tongue is the talking part, not the part that's connected in the back, because it's the movement of the tongue that creates the words that we say. So he says it has to be the majority of the talking part of the tongue. Okay, but be that as it may, one thing we see is that he's saying that for a blemish is going to be, and we don't consider internal blemishes as a blemish for the Bukhari, it's exposed. So again, these two are questions taking us back. They say, according to Rebbe, the tongue is considered revealed and therefore a blemish. How could he say by the Eved, it's not going to be considered as a revealed part to send him free? So the Gemara says, Ella, rather, no. The way you have to read the Bryce we brought before is, Rebbe Omer Sirus, he says that when you castrate, when you emasculate, even though it's hidden inside the testicles, it's going to be considered as revealed. And therefore, that's going to send the Eved free. You're right. And I don't have to tell you the tongue, which sometimes it's revealed, unlike that of the testicles. Ben Azai, when Ben Azai is saying is loshen, only the tongue of a sirus loy, but not castration. So this is going to be actually the inverse of how we originally read the Brisa. We originally read the Brisa as Tanakama. He has just his list. Rebbe adds on sirus. And Ben Azai says, oh, even the tongue. So that would sound like Rebbe does not hold the tongue. We say, no, Rebbe does hold the tongue. But now we're going to say, actually, Ben Azai says, no, only the tongue and not sirus. Says Gemara, then wait a second, my af. Didn't Ben Azai say, oh, so the tongue? That's not going on Rebbe. That's akamaisa. That's going on the first list of 24 that were counted by the Nagoyim, that the Tanakhama said that the Ebed's going to go free That Banazai is adding on regarding Evet, also the tongue, but he's not going on Rebbe. So Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the case, then you shouldn't have written in that order. It makes sense. You should have said the Tanakama, who says only 24. You should have had Ben that adds on the tongue, and then you should have said Rebbe, who adds on not only the tongue, but even the Beitzim. Why are you saying in that order? So Gemara says, you're right. It's really a good question, but I'll tell you why. The Tana of the Braisa, Shama the Rebbe v'Kava. He first heard the teaching of Rebbe, and he connected it to the first list that he had with the Tanakama. Then B'Shama de Benazai. Only then, subsequently, did he hear of Benazai's teaching that he only added on the tongue regarding the first list. Comes out he's disagreeing with Rebbe regarding silus, regarding castration. Now, Vitani, he had already established the word af the way Ben Azai had said it, because Ben Azai said af, because Ben Azai was adding on to the Tanakama's list of the 24, also the tongue. Now, the truth is, the Tana should have put Ben Azai, like we said, between the Tanakama and Rebbe, and then added on Rebbe's teaching of castration on that. The only thing is, since this, he had already connected the Rebbe's teaching to the Tanakama, and that's how it was already fluent in the mouths of the students. So Umishna, the teaching of Rebbe Lo Zazim Kaima wasn't removed from its place, and he put the teaching of Benazai after that. And the reason for this is because in the Talmudic times, the learning was done orally by heart. So it would be very hard to change and to then teach it over in another way. So they had always taught it the Tan 24 Tanakam, and then they heard the teaching of Rebbe, and they said, and Rebbe, and he says, Sirus, right? And then later on, 2 weeks later, they hear there's another teaching Benazai. So really, they would have to teach it over again and change it to put first Benazai, then Rebbe. But everyone had already known the niggin already from that of the Tanakama with Rebbe, so they just added on one more part to adding on Benazai. But you're right, really would have made sense to put Benazai first, because actually Rebbe holds, as we proved, not only Sirus, but even Lashon is considered something revealed, and therefore, yes, it would send the Eved free if it cuts off most of the speaking part of the tongue. Now, the Gemara qualifies this halacha, the brisa, regarding the mouth. Ama Ula. Ula says, Hakol Maidim, everyone agrees, Balashon, regarding the tongue, which we just brought a machlekes, we brought a the conversation regarding if the tongue is considered revealed or not. So he says, let me clear the air over here. Everyone agrees regarding the tongue, L'Inyad Tuma. Well, what's this regarding Tuma? So there's halacha, what's called Maga Beis HaSasarim. If there's a contact of hidden areas, will not contaminate. Now, where do we know this from? The Gemara needed of Memgim learns out from a pasuk where it says hazav. Whatever the zav, who is a person has a tumah that comes out of his male organ, and it says there in the pasuk v'yadav l'shadav b'mayim, and he didn't wash his hands with water, so then he's going to contaminate things. So the Gemara need to ask, hello, if he washed his hands with water, then suddenly he would be tahar? It's not enough just to wash your hands. You would have to do tefillah. Rather, what is the pasuk teaching us? Kol asher yiga b'hazav, whatever the zav is going to touch, that is revealed, like a person's hands, and the zav didn't yet wash himself by toveling his whole body in water. Oh, then v'chibas b'gadav, then he's going to contaminate, and you have to wash his garments. That's what the pasuk is teaching us. So we learn out from the hands that it has to be revealed part. And then you're going to be able to transfer tumah. Oh, so everyone says Ula agrees regarding the tongue as it applies to the transfer of tumah, that the gilahu eitz lasheretz, that is considered revealed regarding if a person could come tameh from when he comes in contact with a dead sheretz. Everyone agrees that if it touches his tongue, that it's going to have the halacha that it's revealed, and that he will be tameh. My time, what's the reason? So that's based on the pasuk in Vayikra. The pasuk says, "Asher yigaboy amarachman." The Torah says that will touch him. Now, as Rashi points out, that pasuk of Asher yigaboy is there in the context of the pasuk of V'yadav l'shadav b'mayimhu, which talks about the transfer of tumah, that it has to be like your hands, which is revealed. Oh, so Havahaina mebar negiyuhu. the tongue is also like the hands that's revealed, that the tongue is also something that sometimes you stick out, and a dead sheretz could touch it when it's revealed. So therefore, if a dead sheretz touches his tongue, it's going to make him tummy. And that says Ula, everyone agrees to that halacha. Okay. Now, also le'inyan tvila, regarding immersing in the mikvah, everyone agrees, ketaman dami, that actually the tongue is considered like it's hidden. Meaning, you don't need the water of the mikvah to come into your mouth. My time, what's the reason? This is from a pasuk in Meyikra. It says, "V'rachas b'sada b'mayim." He's going to wash his flesh in water. Amar Rachmana says the Torah. So ma b'sare, just like a person's flesh, the skin is ma'avroi. It's from the outside. Oh, I've called ma'avroi. So too, whatever's from the outside, meaning, but water does not have to come into your mouth, and it's also coming to exclude the whole tongue that cannot be on the outside. You could stick out part of your tongue. So maybe the mikvah water has to come on part of your tongue. No, because we don't do a partial tvila. Whereas when it comes to touching of tumah, even the minute part that touches is considered touching. So if some of your tongue could be revealed, that could be ashiyigaboy. So what Ula said was, regarding these two halachas, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees regarding tumah that it's considered revealed from ashiyigaboy, that it will be considered tumah. Everyone agrees the other way regarding tvila, that it's like hidden because the berachas b'sar b'mayim has to be on the outside and the whole tongue is not on the outside. The whole machlekes was elin hazal, which we mentioned before. Ula is just being magdir, this machlekes. It's only regarding spraying the tummy person with the paraduma waters. Rebbe, so we had this machlekes. Rebbe held it was good, and the Tanakhama held it's not good. What's the machlekes? The Gemara explains. Rebbe medamala l'tumah. Rebbe compares it to the halacha of tumah, which was, as we just said, for tumah ashiyigaba merachmana, that the tongue is considered revealed, and therefore it will purify, just like it will become tummy in the tongue, become tar in the tongue. But medamala tvila. When compared to the halacha of tvila, which is, as we just said, for tvila everyone agrees that it's considered hidden, and therefore you don't have to get the mikvah waters into your mouth, into your tongue. So therefore, okay, if you spray the paraduma water, it won't work because it's not revealed, because it's hidden. Now, they both are disagreeing in how you explain the following pasuk in Midbar. Pasuk says, the hiza, which talking about this halach of spraying, hatar, the pure person will spray alatame on the impure person, etc. So what do you see from this pasuk? So this pasuk, Rebbe Savar, you have to read like this. And the whole pasuk says, that the pure person will spray on the tummy person, be a mishlish, be a mishvi on the day 3, day 7, bechita be a mishvi, and the day 7 is going to purify him, bechibis bagab, he's going to wash his garments, barachas amayim, and he'll bathe in the waters. That's the whole pasuk. Now, there's two elements in this pasuk that you could compare the spraying to. Rebbe holds like this. The pasuk says, "V'hiza hatar al tamei." The pure person will spray on the tummy person. B'yemish lishi, b'yemish shvi. We know that on day 3 and day 7 is when he sprays him. V'chitoi. Now, v'chitoi is translated as he's gonna purify him, but the way he darshans is al hatame, meaning it says in the pasuk al hatame v'chitoi. V'chitoi also means to spray. So that tells us that the chitoi, the spraying, is on the makom of tumah. Now, if the makom of tumah, we said everyone agrees, is on the tongue, because the tongue could be ashiyigaboy or malachmana, because the tongue could be touched, because you stick it out. So therefore, you see, if you read the pasuk, it's teaching you al hatame v'chitoi, that the spraying is on the tongue. So therefore, again, according to Rabbi, it's going to be good if it sprays on the tongue. Whereas Rabban Sar, but they hold no. The pasuk says v'chitoi. Read v'chitoi as with the last part of the pasuk. It says v'chitoi b'yemeshvi. He's going to spray it on day 7. V'chibes b'gadav. He's going to wash his garments. V'rachatz b'mayim, and he's going to bathe in the water. Oh, you need that the chitoi, the spraying, should fall on a place that's fit for a chitza, which is the tvila, which excludes the tongue, because the tongue, like we said, is not included in the tvila. Tongue is considered hidden regarding the tefillah. So there's two different ways of darshaning the same pasuk. Would we compare it to the halacha of tumah, and therefore it is good? We compare it to the halacha of tefillah, which would make the tongue not good. You make it hidden. So the Gemara now says, okay, fine, that's how they're darshaning, but now it asks on each one why it doesn't say like the other one. But Rabbanan Nami Nedami Latuma. According to Rabbanan, why don't they compare? It says Al Hatame, and then it says V'chitay. Why don't you compare to say that it would be good? Says the Gemara, no. Tahara, the purification of the hazah, of spraying the Tame person who became Tame from a dead person, we would learn out mitahara, from another type of purification, from Tvila. So therefore it makes sense to compare it rather to the Tvila than to the Tama. Therefore, Havalei Lamelef, we should have learned it that way, and that's why they learned it that way. Okay, now the Gemara is on the other opinion. Why doesn't Rebbe compare to Tvila? It says V'chitay, and it says at the end, V'rachatz b'mayim. So maybe compared to Tvila is not good. Says the Gemara, no, B'chibes b'god of Hivsig Inyan. In between V'chitay, B'yem Shvi, and the words V'rachatz b'mayim, which is the Tvila, it has the words V'chibes b'god. What does laundry have to do with this guy? So obviously, it wouldn't make sense that it would go on that. It would make more sense that it's going alatame that it mentions before. So therefore, he doesn't learn like the Rabban. Okay, now the Gemara asks a parenthetical question. Once we're on the topic, the Sava Rebbe, does Rebbe really hold the Inyan Tvila regarding immersion? You told me everyone agrees that Ula regarding Tvila that the tongue is considered Getamidum is considered like hidden, and everyone agrees that the mikvah waters don't have to get onto your tongue. I have Amar Rava and Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says the following halacha, which is very important when women go to the mikvah. There's a story with the maidservant of the household of Rebbe. Shetavlov also, she went to the mikvah and she came out. And then she found the schnitzel that she had earlier that day. They didn't take out the bones. She found a bone between her teeth. And Rebbe required her to go back into the mikvah again because of chatzitza, because the bone will prevent the mikvah waters from getting in between her teeth. Obviously, the water has to get into her mouth. I thought you told me Rebbe holds that the tongue, which is in the mouth, is hidden, and the mikvah waters don't have to get in over there. So what's the problem with chatzitza? That she didn't floss well before she went to the mikvah. Says the Gemara, you're right, although we don't have to actually have the water, the woman gargling in the mikvah, coming inside her mouth, but we need to have an area that's at least fit, that the water could technically come into. Like the famous teaching of Rabbi Zeir that's mentioned many times in Shas. Rabbi Zeir says in the Gemara Menachos of Kaf Gimel Mabeis, he says, you cannot bring a flour offering that has 61 esroinim in one vessel. Because the Rabbanan knew that you cannot mix very well the flour and the oil with so much together. So the Gemara over there asked in Menachos, who cares that it doesn't mix well? But we learned in the Mishnah, if you don't mix it, it's going to be kosher. Which Taisa explains, well, who cares? That's still b'diavad. Like a tchila, maybe, yeah. Taisa says, no, because someone wants to bring a big one, and he only wants to bring one and not two. Be that as it may, that's the Gemara's question saying, well, what's the problem? Why can't you bring 61 together? It doesn't mix well, you don't have to mix. On that, Rabbi Zeir says, yes, whatever's fit for mixing, you're right, then in bila ma'akeves by. Then the mixing will not be critical, and even if you don't mix, it's going to be kosher. If it's not even, you can't even if you wanted to. For example, when there's 61, it's going to be impossible to mix the flour so well with the oil. And actually, bila ma'akeves by. Actually, the mixing will be critical because it has to be row for bila. And therefore, says the Gemara, that's the same thing over here in the halacha of the mikvah. That although the woman does not have to have the water come into her mouth, it has to be fit that the water could come into the mouth, because we said the tongue is considered tamun, it's hidden, it doesn't have to come onto the tongue. But it has to be fit that it could. Now Taisa asks, he says, well, where does the Gemara know this? Meaning regarding the halacha of mincha, Taisa explains that we know this halacha of how we know that it has to be ro labila, because of how it says it in the Torah. It says belila more than once, so usually in kachim, when you repeat something more than once, it's ma'akev. Then why don't you actually have to have that? You have to mix it, because it doesn't say it in the commanding type of way. It says it in this more passive way, so it's like somewhere in the middle. We need it, but not really, which means it has to be ro labila, but you don't actually have to have the bila. That's actually the source, says Taisa, but this halacha we find many times in Shas, why it's like this middle, like grade type of ro labila. But then Taisa says, But how does the Gemara know that mikvah will have the same halacha, like this roll? How do you know? Where do you get this from? Roll Mayim. So it says that the pasuk says v'ruachas es kol b'sarai. You have to wash all of your flesh. What's kol? Sounds like even the hidden places. Now, on the other hand, we quoted from Rashi the drasha v'yadav, which just like hands are on the outside, so do whatever's on the outside, which excludes the base of sarim. Yeah, but still it says kol. So you could say l'chalafach is for that we're including that it has to be at least ro labias mayim, but not actually have to have water, and therefore that's why Rabbi required that she after she flossed her teeth to go back into the mikveh again because of the chatzitza. It has to be at least ro labias mayim. Look, as the Gemara continues to Beis, the Gemara says that this machlekes Rebbe and the Rabbanan, if castrating the slave will be considered as a mumgali or not, seems to be a katanoi. Like the following machlekes tanam we have in the following brisa. The brisa quotes a pasuk in Vayikra, which is the source of the halacha of the prohibition of castration, where it says uma'och and squashed, bekasus and crushed, benasik and torn, becharis and severed. Says the pasuk leisekribul Hashem. You're not allowed to bring such a carbon to Hashem. It says v'ardzchem leisasu, in your land you're not allowed to do this, which means you're not allowed to take your animal to the vet. You can't go castrated. You can't go ahead and do this to the animal anywhere, but definitely can't bring it as a carbon. Okay, but says kulan bebeitzim divrei Yehuda. Yehuda says all these halachas of squashed and crushed and torn and severed, they're all by the testicles. Says Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara jumps in this and says, what bebeitzim aloi begid? It's only by the testicles and not by the organ, the penis. What do you mean? That's for sure revealed. That definitely shaved the halacha of a mum. I'll rather say no. Kulon af bebeitzim de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is saying that don't say that when you do this in the testicles, that's considered a hidden blemish, and therefore wouldn't be disqualification. No, it definitely is recognizable, although it's in a sack, but it's recognizable, and therefore that's also going to be considered as a blemish. But Yaakov says no, kulam begid. They're all by the gid, the actual organ, but not by the beitzim, because that is considered hidden and it's not considered revealed. Rabbi Yisrael, he says depends from these four in the pasuk. I'll split it 2 and 2. Ma'och v'chasas, if it's squashed and crushed, af bebeitzim, then even by the testicles, it's still very much recognizable. When you see the whole thing crushed, you definitely see it as a blemish. But nasuk, which nasuk torn, says Rashi, it's done by hand, but it's totally detached, but it's still hanging in the scrotum, which he says nasuk, this torn, is more than the next case of karas, of severed, as the Gemara says in Menachos of Nevama Beis, that if after it was severed, you go and you do nasuk, which is a tear, you're still going to be chayiv, says Rashi, obviously, because nituk is more than karas. So regarding nasuk, torn, and v'karas, and severed, which you cut the strings that the beitzim are hanging in the scrotum, the testicles hang inside the scrotum, it has different things that it hangs from, and it's hanging a little bit. It's not totally detached, but you severed it. So begidin, that type of injury would only be considered as a mum by the gid, by the male, by the organ itself, a male organ, and a beitzim loy, but that would not be considered as a mum by the testicles. But one thing is, we see that we have this machlekes regarding the beitzim, if that is considered as a mum or not. So the same machlekes we have between the Chama and Rebbe regarding the eved going free, if it's a mum shebegol or not, we see over here in the context of the halacha of the animal karbanas, the same type of machlekes. Do we consider it as the beitzim as a mum shebegoloi or not? The next Mishnah, the fourth in the series of the Mishnayos of our first parak about Isha Niknis, which we spoke about the kinyan of a woman, then we spoke about the kinyan of Eved Ivri, then we spoke about the kinyan of Eved Kanani. Now we speak about, going lower on the totem pole, we go now down to the kinyanim, how to acquire an animal. It says the Mishnah, Behemagasa, large animals, large livestock, cows, Niknis b'mesira, they're acquired with handing it over, where the owner hands it over to the buyer, either by holding on to the saddle, or it's here, as the Brisa taught previously in Daf Yomi. How does Masira work? But with Meshicha, says Rashi, no, that wouldn't work as a kinyan, because that's not the norm to go and pull it in front of it. You don't do this with large animals. Rather, you hold on to it and they go. Places disputes both parts of Rashi. A, that you have to actually hand over the animal. So it's not necessarily you have to hand it over. You just have to just tell him that he could take it. That's Mesira. And also regarding the part about Mashiach not working, this is to the contrary. If anything, Mashiach is better. But that's how Rashi says it. Rashi says the large livestock is only going to work with Mesira, and you have to hand it over, and without Mashiach. Vadaka, and the small livestock, is Bahagba. Is you pick it up, take that little shepsla and you pick it up. Then I take the little picture when you go to the farm, the Chalamoid picture holding up that one, Bahagba, and not with Mashiach, you can't pull it. That's the Reb Meir, Reb Eliezer. Chachamim, they say, no, Be'medaka, small livestock, is niknis b'Mashiach, is acquired by dragging it, by pulling it. That's our Mishnah. The Gemara brings the Dorish Rav Bekim Chunya. In this place, Kim Chunya, Rav gave a drasha, and he said the following halacha. He said, Behemagasa, large animals, niknes b'Mashiach, are acquired by pulling it. That's how Rav darshan. So Shmuel encountered the students of Rav. Amalu, he said to them, Miyom Rav, did Rav really say in this drasha, Behemagasa niknes b'Mashiach? And this whole Gemara is going to be dependent on the Machlekes Rashi and places exactly how you learn, is Mashiach worse, is Mashiach better? So it's a whole different sugya, but at least the way Rashi says it. So he's asking, are large animals acquired by Mashiach? That's what the Rav said. But now we learned in the Mishnah b'Masira Tanan. We learned that it works by handing over and not with Mashiach. And actually, Rav Nami b'Masira Amma. Rav himself also said he would be accustomed to say that the large animal is acquired by Masira. Did he retract from that teaching? So this was old Shmuel asking the students about what's going on. What is that I heard about Rav's controversial drasha that his podcast, he had this whole, it's coming out and saying that it's going to be with Mashiach when all along we always knew in our Mishnah that he said with Mashiach. The Gemara, the Tanya. He's going like, when he said this drasha, was going like the following Tanya, but in the Brisa. The sages, they say, Zu v'zu, the daka and the gasa, the shapsula and the key, the large animal and the small animal, niknes b'Mashiach, are acquired with Mashiach. And it was like that Tana that Rav held, and when he gave his drasha, that the large animal, just like we have the Chacham who always said the small animal is acquired with Mashiach, the large animal that we didn't say in the Mishnah, we said only Mashiach. Don't worry, there's a different Tana, and that's what Rav was going like in the drasha, who says can be acquired with Mashiach. Now, Rabbi Shimon, he says, Zu v'zu b'hagba. He says, actually, both the small animal and the large animal are acquired with lifting it up and not with Masira, not with Mashiach. That's how Rabbi Shimon holds. Now that gets us very sticky. You're telling me that every animal, whether big or small, you could only acquire with Hagba, with lifting it up. If that's the case, what do you do with a pill? An elephant. Rabbi Shimon, b'ma yikna. How are you going to acquire an elephant? You cannot lift up an elephant. How are you acquiring this elephant if you're going to start your Barnum and Bailey and Schwartzberg circus and you want to get the elephant from the previous owner? How are you getting acquisition? How are you acquiring the elephant? So Abai says, no problem. B'chalipin. Take a little pen, kerchief, come to the roof, give him the hat or whatever you want to do, and you give it to the seller. You give him this kerchief, he picks it up, and now that elephant is yours. Or another approach you could do is b'seiches mekayme. What you do is that you rent the place of where the elephant is. Now you acquire it. It's your makom, it's your kinyan chatzar, and then you'll acquire the elephant that way. Reb Zera Amar, he says a different approach. He says maybe arba kelim, bring 4 vessels, manichan tachas raglov, and put it beneath the feet of the elephant, which now your kelim are going to, he's in your kalim. And whatever's in your kalim, you could acquire that way. So he'll step into these 4 bowls, and then you acquire him. So he's going, wait a second. That approach, Shami Minah, you could infer from there that Caleb Shalikeach must mean that the buyer's vessels, B'shus Meicher, in the seller's domain, is Kana Lekech, that the Lekech could still acquire, which that's a machlekes in Baba Basra, Hayim and Aleph. Which Taisa says, wait a second, who said we're talking about it's in the seller's domain? Maybe it's on 13th Avenue. Who said it's in Rosh Hashanah? Says no. Some of the milsa that the animal is in the pen or wherever it is of the seller. But Taisa says the Gemara could have rejected the question, could have said that the seller told the buyer explicitly, I want your kalim to acquire for you. That everyone agrees in Baba Basra Bevam and Av that it would acquire. But upon that, the Gemara could have rejected it. But the Gemara says a different answer. It says, what we're talking about over here is a corner that's near the public domain, but it's not Rosh Hashanah and neither Rosh Hashanah. So regarding that case is where it's not Rosh Hashanah. So then, yeah, if he goes into your bowls, you could acquire him that way. Or as the Gemara continues, Vav Med Aleph, the 4th way, Inami, you could have actual Hagbah. You could actually lift up the elephant, is Bechaviles Moires, are with the vines of the ropes of vines, which is that are 3 tefachim above the ground, and you bring the elephant to go, you lift him up onto the vines, where lifting up 3 tefachim is considered as hagbah, because now he's removed from the category of loved, he's not considered connected to the ground anymore. So if you could somehow get the elephant up onto those strong ropes, that would be considered a kinyan of hagbah. Now, this is controversial. Taisvis over here is an author that was writing about different animals, and he talks about some of these things. So Taisvis brings from Rav Reb Meshulam that why did we pick specifically chaviles moires? Why couldn't you say about stones or wood? You can get them to get up higher also in different ways too. Why dafka chaviles moires, ropes of vines? It says because actually elephants eat chaviles moires. As the Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Rav Chesam and Aleph, that you're allowed to carry, I mean that the shiur of carrying chaviles moires on Shabbos, I mean you're actually allowed to move it because it's food for elephants. So he says what you do is, the way you could lift up the elephant is by putting this carrot, so to speak. You put the chavilas moires higher, and the elephant's going to jump, and he's going to lift himself off the ground, he's going to eat it. And that's considered as hagbah. So flying elephants is a controversial thesis regarding how is this going to be exactly. Rav Meshulam is saying that you can acquire hagbah, the elephant, by jumping up to get to eat his carrot. That's the 4th way possible about how to be kind of with hagbah, the elephant. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.